On September 18th, 2020, something happened that I think was expected but still also surprising. Surprising and anticipated for all the Nintendo fans out there, and maybe even just some nostalgia buffs. That is Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Now this is a big deal. It's a big deal because I feel like a lot of people with Nintendo during the Switch era sort of feel like the glory days of the Wii Shop and all these things being ported forward had fallen by the wayside. It's almost like Nintendo wasn't paying attention to what people wanted. And that's why I think this was unsurprising and surprising at the same time, because so many people were like, it's a no-brainer for Mario 64 and the like to come to the Switch. It's perfect. Like, we all want it. It's time for it to come back. But at the same time, people were sort of like, well, Nintendo's been doing some weird things lately, so probably won't happen. And then it did. And they brought along Sunshine and Galaxy, both of which I've never played. And so I think the thing that's been on people's minds is a sort of skeptical optimism. Because on one hand, it was finally coming. And on the other hand, ports tend to be better left in the past sometimes. The punchline is, boy, did they deliver. Now, as a full disclaimer, I never played Sunshine and Galaxy when I was a kid. I didn't have a GameCube, didn't have a Wii. I can confidently make the assumption that if Mario 64 held up this well, then the other two are gonna be perfectly fine. Let's start with the visuals. Obviously, it's the first thing you see when you turn it on, but it stood out so amazingly when I started this game up. It immediately took me back to 1996. With ports, a lot of times what happens is these games are obviously designed to be on CRT televisions, right? So you use the blurriness of a CRT to make the jaggedness look smoother. That's what made these characters discernible on a television. Whereas if you take away the blurriness of that TV, you can't discern details. And that's what happens a lot now is we take games, especially from the 8 and 16-bit era, and bring them onto an HD or a 4K screen, and they look jagged and they look unpleasant unless you're looking for that art style for an artistic reason. But it feels like a modern day game that's meant to look like a 64-bit game. That's what makes the nostalgia so powerful, because it makes you feel today the way you felt when you first saw it. A lot of times what happens is we think of a game from the past, and we think about how it made us feel at the time, and then we play it today, and it underwhelms us because we don't feel what we did back then. I'm gonna say something maybe controversial and make the example of Final Fantasy VII. When I was a kid, I didn't play Final Fantasy VII because I didn't have a PlayStation, but I heard everyone around me talking about it. That feeling of wonder, of knowing what other people were saying about it, lasted until they ported it to the PlayStation 4, which is when I finally played it. And it did nothing for me. And I think it's because what made Final Fantasy VII so amazing is that it took the 16-bit RPG formula and brought it to the 3D world in a way that hadn't been seen before. That's what made it revolutionary. And so part of what makes Mario 64 and the Mario 3D All-Stars in general so palatable today is two things, the visuals and the gameplay. And with the visuals, I think they knocked it out of the park. The colors are stunning, the visuals are smooth and easy on the eyes, which is what you want in a platformer, especially something like Mario, where Mario is known. He is nothing if he's not the smoothness of his jumping, the predictability of his movements. Now, gameplay in general, with a new game or a retro game, is an area where the game can be made or broken. And with a retro port, it's even bigger of a deal because our sensitivity to movement and gameplay has evolved so much since then. This applies even more so with something like Mario, because Mario is a character who is known. Mario is the forefront. Every game that exists today that has any type of jumping owes itself to the mechanics that developed from Super Mario Bros. On. The predictability and the smoothness of the character's movements based on your inputs is massive. But even more than that, they did a fantastic job in porting over the controls to our modern day scheme when it was based on a control that was so outrageous at the time. Now, with one caveat here, this opinion does have some nuances. Let's start with handheld mode. Now, with handheld mode, it's absolutely fantastic. You've got your small screen, your small 720p screen, which aids with the visuals like we were talking about, but the responsiveness of the controls is fantastic. This is an amazing game to play handheld. Jumping feels intuitive, moving the stick around intuitive. What I really love is how they've adapted the C buttons to the right stick while still maintaining the quirkiness of the camera of back then. This is where things get interesting because Mario was really the flagship 3D game to come out into the world. And when you compare it to things like, for example, Tomb Raider, I mean, Nintendo got that so right. People had some problems with the controller. I personally loved the Nintendo 64 controller. I thought it was super weird and quirky, and it just looked really cool. It had a joystick when no one else had a joystick. It had the Z trigger, all that stuff. Amazing. Because we had no standard of a second controller at the time, using the C buttons was fine in terms of controlling the camera. Once a second stick came out and a free roaming camera came out, then Mario 64 felt even more outdated. I think some people may have a problem with the fact that they didn't incorporate a free roaming camera and kind of program that into the port. I personally think that that's a little bit silly, because if you want something like that with a free roaming camera, you already have that. Super Mario Odyssey. The fact that they were able to, again, in the interest of nostalgia, the fact that they were able to take that old camera style, which was part quirky, but it was also a part of the tactical approach of the game. Like, you had to learn how to use the camera to actually play the game. The fact that they so easily mapped that to the right stick, where you just flick the stick in the direction that you would press the C button and the camera goes, and that it was intuitive. It didn't take more than a minute to get used to that and just use it to your advantage and play the game smoothly. It was absolutely fantastic. I was blown away by that. That being said, the camera angles definitely make a platformer, a 3D platformer at that, much more difficult. But that's not something that's any different from when it came out in the 64-bit era. These two areas, the visuals and the gameplay, combined to bring to the modern era and make me feel like I just picked up my N64 controller a day after finishing the game in 1996. That is how it's done. That's the bottom line. Now, I did mention that there were caveats. The responsiveness in handheld mode is absolutely fantastic. No issue at all. And this is a game where if you felt input lag, you would definitely notice it and feel it. I did when I put it onto docked mode. When you put it onto docked mode in a normal TV without game mode, there is a significant lag to the point where you actually have to learn to plan when to hit the buttons. It's a little bit problematic when you need something to feel so smooth. Putting it into game mode does decrease that input lag a little bit, but it's still noticeable compared to when you're doing it in handheld mode. Handheld mode, you don't feel it at all. The solution to this would be if you dock it to a computer monitor, in particular, a computer monitor with a high refresh rate or a low response time. I tried it out on my monitor and the input lag completely went away. It felt like handheld mode again. Zero lag. It was great. Which comes down to the final question. Who is this game for? Well, if you grew up with Mario 64 and you're looking to scratch that nostalgic itch, buy this game. It is absolutely fantastic. It will do everything you wanted it to do. If you're somebody who's never played Mario 64 before, buy this game. It fits so well into today's era. It feels like a game that was made today. If you're a Souls-like player, play this game, especially Rainbow Ride. You all know what I'm talking about. But anyway, those are my thoughts of Super Mario 3D All-Stars. I hope you found this useful. I hope this helped you make your decision on whether or not you should be getting this. Although I probably picked the wrong game to start out with, because I don't think there's anybody who's gonna doubt getting this. I look forward to what Nintendo's gonna bring later. I really hope that they bring Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time or Link's Awakening may have been... One of those two was my first Zelda game ever. Like this video to let me know I'm going in the right direction and you want to see more. I have no idea how to end these videos, so I will see you next time.